SQV Conversation. I'm your host, Shannon Joy McKeel, and with me today is an amazing woman who is running for judge. Can you imagine? So welcome to the SQV, Christine Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to honor the small, quiet voice.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you. I've been looking to connect back with you since the first time I met you.
Well, we had a good time. It always happens when we go to the Center Club. Meet some really neat people, and we're able to, kind of use those contacts as we will. So it's fun to be able to have you in my sandbox, Chrissy. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
So just a little bit about Christy. You go by Christine or Chrissy? What's the best way?
Yeah, so I'm having like a little bit of an identity crisis because I've always gone by Chrissy, and my girlfriends and my close friends call me Chris. But when I started running the campaign, it became Christine because it's professional, and you're running for judge, and it's got to be a real sturdy name. So you can call me Chris because we're friends, and that's what my friends call me. As we're on this campaign trail, it's Christine.
Fantastic. So I just find your story so fascinating. So I'm just going to get right into it. Tell us how you were made in this wonderful world and how you're serving the universe at this time, Christine.
So right now I am, I've been in private practice as a lawyer doing family law and criminal law, and that is the bulk of the service that I've offered to this community has been in the way of legal services, in addition to the community endeavors that I've been embarking on for quite a while, mostly in the realm of substance abuse disorders and mental health awareness, something very near and dear to my heart. One of the things that's great about being on a campaign trail is an opportunity to kind of reflect on the work that you've done, whether it be through your career or your involvement, and realizing that everything sort of started with one thing and got me here to where I am today. So while I'm a practicing lawyer, I have spent a lot of time helping individuals, mostly who are suffering from substance abuse disorders, those who are suffering from mental health illness, and that's really been my heart and passion for many years.
Wonderful. Thank you for that work. It's important work. It needs to be done. So why are we running for judge? This is huge.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I had always known that this would be a path that I took. I started my legal path back in 2003 as a legal secretary and worked through going to school. I went to Stetson University, graduated from law school, and acclimated back into the legal force doing criminal defense with Ralph Fernandez, who is a well-known lawyer around here, and worked for him for about 10 years. And in that capacity, I've served this community over maybe thousands, maybe over, I think we had to actually calculate it for purposes of giving accurate reporting during the campaign, but somewhere in the realm of 2,000 to 3,000 clients that I've had over my career, people who have trusted me while they've been in their most difficult times. And, we were talking when we were at the Center Club that the pandemic really changed what the legal world looked like. It really changed what law and the practice looked like. And I had just gone out on my own in 2019, September of 2019. And what smacked me in the face right around the corner was a pandemic. And so when I was very used to being down at the courthouse and running around, all of a sudden I am behind a screen doing Zoom and not having interaction. And I realized, I love to practice law, but I really love being in a courtroom because I get to be with the people. And I believe that's the arena where the greatest work is being done. It's where we impact the most lives. And in that sort of realization, it was like, okay, how do I get back into a courtroom right now? Because that's where I belong.
Yeah.
And so that has been the quest. And I knew that this was going to be a dream. This was always a dream. This is something I was going to do my whole life, but I didn't know that I was ready and confident that it was now is the time. But I feel very good about that decision. I feel like my skills that I've acquired over the last 12 years have made me uniquely qualified for this position, and I'm ready to go for it.
So are you running against anyone yet?
I have one opponent, and everybody's always like, oh, like that's, I'm so sorry you have one opponent. And it's like, well, you could have 4 opponents or 5 opponents. Having one opponent, it's another female, And that makes me really proud. And some people I think probably look at me and say, yeah, right. But it does, because no matter what happens in this election, there's going to be a female elected to the bench. And I think that's very powerful and very strong. So I'm proud of that. I have a worthy opponent, and there's only two of us. And so this election will end in August. I'm not going to be going to the general in November, which is the election that most people associate with, getting their president and getting their governor. That won't be happening for me. So we're less than 90 days out from the primary election, and it'll be over at that time with just one opponent.
Okay, so I want to just let people know, in Hillsborough County, where can they go to find their polling place? How can people vote at this point? What do they need to know in order to vote for you?
I'm so glad you asked, because I actually got a deep dive education on elections, because I didn't realize that this process would necessarily, for some people, would end in August. I thought everybody kind of went to November eventually. So right now you can go to the supervisor of elections, the Hillsborough County supervisor of elections. And if you want a mail-in ballot, you have to opt in, which is new. That was not something that we had to do before. You have to ask them, request them for a mail-in ballot. Those mail-in ballots will go out, and then there will be a period of early voting from the beginning of August until right up until the election. I believe it's the 17th is when early voting closes. If you vote during early voting, you can vote at any precinct. If you wait until election day on August the 20th, you will have to go to your assigned precinct, and all of that information is on the supervisor of election website. You just click on where you live, and it'll tell you which precinct you need to report to, and you either go to the library or the school or wherever it is that you vote for. And that's really, really important, because the rules have changed, especially as it relates to the mail-in ballots.
Okay, wonderful. Stella. Sorry, she's being obnoxious. She's got a little itch or something. She's snorting at it. My little bulldog, she's crazy. I know your puppies are with you too.
They're here, and they're actually being good, which I'm really surprised. I'm glad we did it later in the day, because the lawn guys were outside and they go wild. Amazon, Uber, lawn guys, they'll lose it. So
that's hilarious. So I remember why you and I wanted to talk. I remember why I really wanted you on the SQV, and thank you for reminding me of those things. Your energy is very empathetic, and I appreciate that. This is something that I've heard from some friends and some family members, because they were touched by it over the pandemic. And I know that Florida has an excellent penal system. I know that we have the Florida Foundation for Correctional Excellence. We have lots of other associations and lots of other people that are in the government, working in private sector, working to rehabilitate our corrections inmates. So when they get out, they don't reoffend. I know that our state does a really good job on that. I know that you were also an attorney through the pandemic.
Yes.
And in some states, people languished, and they sat in jails that were supposed to be holding cells for years, and way too long. And it was a train wreck. So it's just part of it. So I know that Florida has an excellent track record. They're doing things that a lot of states are not doing. But can you talk a little bit about what we learned from the pandemic in the penal system, in the legal system in this state that you could have been touched with, what we learned, what we need to do next time? Because they say another pandemic is coming, that this might happen again, and it probably will. It's just a matter of time. So can you tell me what we've learned from the pandemic in the state of Florida in that realm?
Sure. So I think the number one thing that we learned is that it is possible to do things differently. As much as I struggled with not being physically somewhere at the courthouse, we learned that it is very possible for us to run the government, to run a courthouse via an electronic means, right? So even the way that we're communicating today, this may not have happened if our schedules didn't link up and we were able to find each other at the same time. But because we're able to get on Zoom, get on Google Meet, we're able to connect at almost any time. So the first thing that the pandemic taught us is that it can be done differently. Because before, a lot of courts didn't offer an option where you could have this sort of face-to-face with a judge so quickly, so efficiently, without physically being somewhere. It allows attorneys who are practicing across the state to be in two places at one time, essentially. Because you can imagine when they run a docket in the morning, if you've got to be in Hillsborough County to run a couple of cases, you can't also be in Pinellas County running. Now, you can do it if you're electronic, right? I can log into one, I could simultaneously be in another one and be waiting for my cases to be called and handle different things. So I think it sped up how quickly we can process cases by learning that there's another way to do it besides having people physically come to the courthouse, right? That carries a lot of extra collateral stuff like parking and security and all of the things that go with that. So we learned that there was another way to do it. It also allows us an opportunity to get in front of a judge in a quick way. I'll tell you that before, if I wanted to get in front of a judge, you got to set a hearing, you got to set a notice, you got to do all of these things to get to that place. Now it's almost like, hey, we can shoehorn you into a 5-minute time slot. We can get you in 10 minutes because we're able to communicate in this way. I know that some people like it, some people don't like it. There's pros and cons to it all. But if we have more face time with the court, that means we're rapidly moving cases. And that ultimately has a trickle-down effect to how we're processing people, whether it be criminal cases, which are more important because people are incarcerated, how we can reach them and get them out of jail or get their case to conclusion so that it has reached its ending, or something like, in a civil case where I may just need to talk to the judge about a simple one issue that could take, we could do it in rapid speed, but I wouldn't have that opportunity if I had to do it in a conventional way. So while it had, we talked about the struggle. The struggle is you don't get any time with people. And there is a negative to that. Interacting with humans, having face-to-face contact, getting a hug. We were talking about no virtual hugs, like a real hug. There's a benefit to that, and you'll miss that in this way. But if we maximize how we're using electronics to actually process a docket, then I think it's a benefit for us.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. And there's so much good technology with AI coming out. There's so much that we can do to eliminate those bottlenecks that happen in clerical positions. I'm learning more and more about that every day. So if any of your courts want to learn more about that, I'm your girl.
Reluctant to it, to learn, they want to learn a new trick. And the pandemic forced us to do it, right? Because you had new judges who were coming in that were younger, and even newer lawyers who were like, hey guys, there's a computer out there that has a lot of capabilities that we could be utilizing. And all the old guys were sort of like, whoa, we don't want to learn a new trick, right? But the pandemic forced us to do it. There was no other way to do it. And so it said, okay, it can be done a different way.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to harness the newest technology. And, I just a shameless plug. I've been talking to people over the past year who are the best at their industry and vetting partners for my consulting clients. So, people are like, what does that mean, a super connector? And I'm like, well, you guys understand that I know people, and I've had friends that have been, colleagues for the past 30 years through the military, through journalism, through marketing, through all of these different industries I've worked in. But on top of that, I also have the best at the business. And, technology is changing so quickly that we really do need to stay connected to the best people for these types of more complex problems that the businesses and courts face. So it's been fun to kind of find out the who's who. I met with a couple people this morning that just blew my mind. So it's fun, and I know you're networking a lot as you're promoting yourself on the trail, and there's challenges that go to that, and you've got to do a lot of networking. So I know that you're a super connector now too.
Yes, I am. I think so. I'm getting up there.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, do you know the statistic in the state of Florida or across the U.S., how many female judges are currently sitting on their courts?
So we actually talked about this at Judge Black's investiture, and forgive me, I don't know the exact statistic, but I think it was either with her investiture or the woman who was sworn in right before her tipped the scales where there was more women on the bench, at least in Hillsborough County, than men. So I don't have the exact. It's over 50%. If I remember correctly, I remember us sort of capitalizing on that moment, and that's why I said how cool it was to be running against another woman, somebody who's my age, and sort of, moving through this with somebody who I can really appreciate just the idea that a woman could be appointed to the bench, and knowing that no matter what, that was going to happen. I find that to be really cool.
It's like Barbie Land coming true.
That's true.
I just love it. So I just wrote a blog on LinkedIn. I don't know if you caught it last week about the percentage of women in the workplace, and globally only, this is a horrible number, 8% of CEOs are women. And I propose, well, what would happen if we had more women leading companies, right? What would happen if we had more women leading countries? The statistic that I found interesting was that only 22% of UN policymakers are female. So that means at a world level, which I think is an interesting statistic, we're completely underrepresented as a gender. And so I would like to talk to you and just play around in this sandbox for a little bit, because you're seeing now in the state of Florida so many more women that are coming into these positions of power and establishing policy and setting precedents to make our laws better for our communities. And I would propose that the reason Florida is doing better than other states is probably because of the influence of female judges.
Wow.
So, I mean, what is a woman in a CEO position or in a leadership position or in, as a policewoman, or, I mean, as an attorney, what do women bring to the table when there's policies to be considered?
Well, nobody ever gets into a position of power without having a massive amount of pedigree behind them, whether they're a male or female, right? So I think what you have to look for is the X factor. And I think women have an X factor in the sense that we're able to, not only do the job, whatever it was that we are designed to, whatever the task is for that day, but we also bring a little bit of maybe more empathy, maybe more personality. Maybe we have had a little bit of a struggle to get into the position that we are. So we appreciate that we are in that position. I think we also recognize balance. A lot of women are not only the masters of their craft, but they're the masters of their home. They have, families to take care of. And so they've sort of pretty much, made time management a non-issue because they've mastered how to do that. So I think that there's the X factor that women have just by virtue of all of the responsibilities that they have in addition to the role that they play in their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you're right. And I talked a little bit about in my blog about how, wouldn't it be great if more women could lead companies, and how different our world would be if more women were given that opportunity. And, for different reasons, different women aren't able to be put in those places of authority. And, there's a lot of women that have had children and been completely taken out of the workplace. I had 3 children, and over a course of 10 years, I stayed home for 7 years. So that put me behind a little bit. But, a lot of women, this, especially, in this age of, pursuing your career, a lot of women decide not to have kids. And I think that that's wonderful. I mean, those women that I know that are even younger than me that didn't make that sacrifice to have children, they've gone on to be amazing leaders like yourself. And, you don't have children that you're leaving this legacy to, but you're creating policy that can change the world. So you should be very proud of that.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate an opportunity where women can have the choice of doing it however they want, and men too. Like this, it's not just exclusive to one gender. Everybody can choose how they value this, their success, whether that means that they have their company and their home, or if they devote it to just their work. That is a choice that I think everybody should be able to have without the stigma attached to what your decision may be. There are benefits to both, I believe.
Yeah, there are. And it's a beautiful little collage that we make up with our differences and our similarities. And that's what you find when you do networking. So, so the people are voting in August. The day to vote is August 9th, you said?
The 20th.
The 20th. Yeah. Okay. So people are voting on August 20th. So between now and August 20th, what is your calendar like? What do you have to do to get ready for this?
Yeah, it's massive. So I do, today it was a day of 2 or 3 events where I do, meet with people for coffee or have a lunch or go to a networking thing, or I still serve on 2 boards. So I had a meeting today with the board to keep up with the community service that I do. And then the weekends are kind of taken over by canvassing. We're starting to do the canvassing. We got our signs in, so we'll have the crew out there putting out signs. And the more that I can be out in the community, the better. So that's what the calendar looks like from now until then, is just how much can I put myself in front of a potential voter so that they can get to know me, meet me, and ask me questions about the election. I've had a really good time actually sharing what I've learned about elections with other voters, because they go, oh my God, I had no idea that because they'll say, I'll see you in November. And I'm like, no, you won't. August, you got to see me in August, So I'd love to be able to share that message and get my message out and meet other people. So it's going to be pretty packed from now until then, but it's going to go by fast. I filed back in July. I knew I was going to do this. So I've been at this for almost a year now, on the trail, if you will. I filed to run back in July, but it's gone by very fast. So I know that while it seems like, oh, so far away, it's not. It's going to be here in no time.
Yeah. And so what kind of, I'm curious about the boards you serve on. What kind of community service are you into right now?
So one of the boards that I serve on is the Human Development Center, and that's a very near and dear organization to me. We offer opportunities for young men who otherwise wouldn't have opportunities to kind of acclimate back into a society. They suffer from mental illness, or they've been incarcerated, they're high risk to the community. So we give them a safe place for them to live, and we provide them with educational opportunities for them to learn some basic skills that they otherwise wouldn't have. And I love being a part of that. The group that runs that board is tremendous. Just like when you meet somebody who is just doing like their best work out in the community, and they're doing whatever their passion is, these people love what they do. They pour everything into it. So I love to serve with them. I serve on the advisory board also for the Tampa Club, which is more of a social thing. But that's really cool too. That's where I was this afternoon, to network with other individuals like myself. And we're always like bouncing ideas off of each other. So we did that today. I go to Kiwanis and go to their lunches and do some of their events. And God, the bar association, there's so many things that we do, but most dear to my heart would be probably the Human Development Center, the work that I do there.
Sounds amazing. That's wonderful. We have talked about so many things in such a short time. I'm going to wrap this up, but were there any aha moments that you wanted to circle back on that we talked about that you really thought that we need to do? Or is there any other questions you might have, or any last thoughts you want to leave our viewers with?
Last thoughts. Gosh, that's a loaded question. There's so many things. Like every time I'm with you, when you meet somebody and you're like, we got to be friends. The first time we met, we were bonding over, I was talking about the work that I was doing in Marchman, and Marchman being another thing that's very near and dear to my heart, because in addition to my private practice, I get to interact with individuals in our community that are suffering with substance abuse disorders. And I represent about a caseload of over 300 people at any given time. And we represent people who are elderly, seniors that are struggling, and we represent kids, juveniles. So there's a spectrum of that. And what I've learned is that this is an area that it crosses all boundaries, every gender, every race, every age group. And we're not talking about it enough. And when we started talking about, you were telling me your story, and we got to vibing about these things, and I thought, this is an issue that everybody, no matter where you are, can connect to. Whether you've suffered with something or somebody who is suffering with something, it is what connects us all. And I learned recently that they started teaching, and you go to judge school if you get an opportunity to serve. And they started a chapter on substance abuse and mental health, where they actually are now educating judges on how to handle litigants that may be struggling, and how can we implement programs that are more problem solving instead of incarceration, and sort of exploring these things. So I I've had a lot of aha moments in this podcast, but with me and you, it was sort of like, no matter where you go, everybody always has a struggle. Everybody always has a story. And it's really important that we try to connect and be empathetic and listen to each other, and get to the core of what somebody may be going through, because we're all connected in some way.
Yeah. And I know that I read on your website that the reason that you went into law was because of your uncle.
Oh, yeah. I think we touched on that a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, my uncle, that's my greatest story. It's my favorite story. My uncle was incarcerated while I was in law school, and we had lost touch. He had suffered with a substance abuse disorder, and we had lost touch as families do when people are struggling. And when you go to law school, all of a sudden people think that you're important because one day you may be a lawyer. And so I started getting jail mail, not just from my uncle, but I would get jail mail all the time from people. But I would keep my uncle's jail mail, and one day I finally started going through it and realized that there was something that something that I needed to look into, and it sparked my interest. So while I was in law school, I went through his file, and I used to go hang out at the courthouse. And this is when there was paper files, and we'd read copies and we'd do all the things, and finally had the courage to go to my boss and say, hey, there's something here. We should really look into it. And he agreed to file a motion. Fast forward, that motion 2 years later comes up for hearing, and I'm a lawyer. And so I got to fill that case, and that it was successful. We were able to reverse his conviction. He got a 30-year sentence for trafficking in methamphetamines. And the court decided that it was the way that it was imposed was an illegal sentence. He had already served 5 years, and they granted him a release. And that was, it's my favorite story because the type of motion that we argued was a post-conviction motion. It's only granted 1% of the time. So there was never a moment in time when I thought that I was going to go in there and win that motion.
Wow.
But I was ready. I had prepared, and I had done it, and I had gone through it because I really just wanted to do a good job for him and be like, I did my very best, but never really thought that we were going to win. And when we did, the reward, the payback was in what happened later. Bobby would get out of prison. He had never had kids previously. He now had 2 children. His first child he named after me as sort of a nod of gratitude for his freedom. It also taught me that, had it not been for him having a niece that was a lawyer, there are a lot of Uncle Bobbies in the world that didn't have that opportunity, right? So we have to be very mindful, I think, especially if you're serving in a place where you have power and you're on, you're making decisions like that you realize that not everybody has that same access, and you're giving everybody a fair shake, and you're giving everybody an opportunity to be heard. And the best part is that Bobby went on to do a lot of amazing things in his community. He holds a job. He's been sober now since he was released. He's got 2 kids, a wife, a beautiful house, and all the things. And so that is, to me, the greatest gift.
That is awesome. Good job, Christine. I'm proud of you. I tell people this, and I'm writing a second book. And I tell people this, you can complain a lot, but you have to pick your passion. So you have to pick what you're passionate about. And for you, that was, helping your uncle, and that was going to law school. And, with these community service items that you're involved with, they're important to you because this is who you are. So as we are all navigating our careers and navigating our personal pursuits and where we want to spend our time, I would encourage everyone and challenge everyone to pick your passion and get yourself ready for that, whether that means some schooling or some experience or some volunteering. Get yourself set up to go in that direction where you can make the biggest impact and for things you're passionate about. So it's clear that you've done that, my friend. So I want to thank you for appearing on the SQV. We have certainly honored our small, quiet voice by appearing here. So thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You do the same. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always wonderful to see you and to connect with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste, Christine.
Namaste. See you later.